Hi all. This one's going to be, I guess, just another update in terms of where we are. Um, I think again, just going to reiterate some of the things that we've already covered over the last couple of months. Really, I mean, for me personally, this is over the last year, um, especially since we started the Discord channel and been putting more regular updates. I think it's kind of amazing to see this becoming institutionalized, and I think it's just really fascinating now to see so many people on Twitter and chats and so on, and it's panic selling, and it was like this was completely unexpected. It really wasn't. I think we had this low volume move, from down 28. It was kind of ugly. We looked at this in August, and it was, well, yes, you can take it if you want it, but it's not really going anywhere. And I spoke about this back in September, right? So if we look at where we were, I think it was 25th, 26th, so around this kind of level. I was talking about on this, you can see the date there, 25th of September. Looking at the lines and putting all the kind of key areas into this, and I'll fast forward just a little bit further into some of these levels here. So we had this one here, and this was going into then the 4th of October. I think it was the 29th. I was actually showing this, more full on. So the key level was already kind of written in. That was obviously the price that we hadn't explored yet at this within Bitcoin. There's a couple of reasons for why we were there, but there was also a lot of reasons as to why we'd come back to the same value area. Okay, so if I stick this on just to show this particular point, you'll actually see on the what was the interesting group. So what you'll see is that going back into September, we were at and around this point, 25th of September. So we were around this point, right? Now, we rallied on up. That was obviously the interesting area. You could see practically to the pip there. We come off, we bounced it, we went up. Now, this time, what we actually did was faked out above that level, right? So that would have trapped a lot of buyers in that position. And you can see the strength of this particular level because, again, we've come back from the drop through, back in, and retested that to the pip. Okay, so that for me was clearly defined and showing who was in control of this particular move, right? Now, if I go back in time on this, all I'll do is just get rid of these so they're not on my chart. And I'll put this off a second. Now, if we go back in time, okay, and we go back a fair bit, so what I'll do is I'll come into this particular post. And I know I've showed this in the last couple of streams, but it's really important to stress, where we are and why we are where we are. Okay, so this particular post, if you haven't seen this or you're watching the videos kind of for the first time, then ultimately this one is a worthwhile post, and I'll post a link into this at the bottom of the YouTube video. So this basically goes back, all the way to the first post was in December 2020, and talking about how the institutions are going to be changing the play. We got the reaccumulation in, I think this was January, February time. Key levels, yeah, January 23rd, look, key levels and why and where the possibilities were. And you can see, I got around 48 as a mark there, 46, 48 for the first phase. This was the institutional kind of buyer's climax, if you will. And then ultimately, buyer's climax back down, testing the value area, and then up, obviously, off you go. So coming all the way through, obviously this one was the nice rocket call. So you can see we've actually done nothing different to what we would expect. We kind of come on down, we moved on up, and it was practically to the pip. We had 2.5K out using 8-hour blocks rather than daily blocks, but we've hit the extension and off we go. So the roadmap, right? And this is why I said just now that going back, all the way to, well, to March in this particular roadmap, but going back into the time and the phase that we were at and where we were at, this is why it was nothing really kind of unexpected in this particular move, right? You could see that on the weekly time frame, the previous all-time high was the weekly 3, coming down for a weekly 4, and up for a weekly 5. Okay, now the problem for me, as we started to get in to this weekly 5 scenario, which would have been the monthly 3, you could see that with the low volume that we were getting here, right? And it was just kind of an ugly move. I didn't like the 1, didn't like the 2. 3 actually come to a nice extension, making this to fall back into liquidity. But ultimately, this 5 was just already running out of steam before we got to the 4. Okay, so The only thing that I would suggest on this was to pull the three down into the kind of territory that we hit, which is where the levels that I've just mentioned come into play, right? So that was obviously what I was looking at, back then. What else have we covered? So yeah, so I've covered this. You can see, September the 30th, this was the level. Up we went in November, bounced off it. So, there was nothing really shocking or surprising in all of this move, right? Now, we've come on up. We go back, let's have a look. This was the channel that was on the 29th of August, right? You can actually see on the 29th of August, draw in the 1, 2, 3, 4 move. So this was the move that, could have been interesting if you wanted to take it. But personally, as I said, and I've said again, and I've said more all the way through the year, is that I wasn't looking at this particular move personally. The stop loss would have been too low for me for a kind of 1-to-1 risk reward ratio. That's not the kind of trade I'm looking for in crypto. I want to take this and take it, with confidence and comfort as a whole. So, you know, the moves are kind of written there. There's nothing really shocking, nothing surprising. It's done what we've said all the way back, all the way to December last year. What else have we got? So we got, the weekly forecast. I've just covered that. The interesting group obviously just covered this. There's a couple of levels. I'll come into these in a second in terms of the smaller time frame. But I guess, all I'm trying to kind of put here is that where we are right now, we got to assume that we've hit the monthly level 3, right? So in a big picture, we actually had the 3 weekly, the 4 weekly, the 5 weekly, and that 5 weekly equals the 3 on a monthly. Okay, so if we assume that the Fibonacci extension levels were fine, even the extensions there, like I said, I didn't like this, I didn't like that. There was a 5-wave move in there, I didn't like that. But if you come inside of this, you've got the 1, you got the 2, we got the 3, we got the 4, we got the 5, and these moves actually worked. Now, the question was then whether or not this was actually the 5 and we had an expanded flat in there, and down. If that is the case, then ultimately I just feel we're A right now. We're going to come back B next, obviously, and then C at a bare minimum. Now, there's nothing stopping us. We don't need to go deep in that, as I've said in the last couple of streams. This could easily just go sideways. It's long-winded. It's an ugly process, but we are actually in that process of a monthly fall. Okay, so one of the subscribers last night, he actually shared a post with somebody else talking about what's happening kind of going into the new year, what tends to happen in stocks and I suppose more traditional instruments. When you think of the big boys, they've got basically a reset at the start of the year, start of a new financial year. So coming into Christmas, you tend to find a decent sell-off. Now, the only thing that you have with Bitcoin is retail is actually absorbing a lot of that sell-off. So ultimately, go back to what I've said, through March this year in terms of painting the roadmap. That was the first buyer's climax that I was calling. We had the Wyckoff schematic sitting in this range here, and ultimately off we come, right? Now, if you think of what these guys were doing, this was possibly a 10x trade on what they'd been buying down, in the accumulation phase prior to this, right? So, you're talking, let's just say 4 to 5K in terms of purchase and by the million, right? This isn't the we'll buy one Bitcoin. This is Bitcoin on Bitcoin on Bitcoin on Bitcoin. So realistically, we've got a value area, which is why the price then come back on down to this value area. Now, what you'll find is that anything above this value area, these guys are seeing as kind of a premium. So if retail are willing to pay premium prices for this, then that we're still in that sell-off phase, right? I've talked again about the commitment of traders and why retail assume that the big boys are currently getting wrecked in that move up when these guys are shorting. And you've just got to ask yourself that, is if retail are the people buying and these guys are the ones selling, right? This is the leverage funds selling off. Short is in the blue. So if these guys are the guys selling off and retail are all, pump this to the moon and diamond hands and so on, all you got to realize is that retail lose, 75+% of the time. These guys know what they're doing. They're professional money makers. These aren't postmen and firemen and people that have just got a regular 9 to 5 job. These guys are, professional money makers. They do this for a living with a deep, deep pocket, billions of pounds in terms of leverage to play with. And I don't mean leverage in the sense of leveraging the trades, but just, they can buy and hold. And if it takes them a year, if it takes them, 18 months, it's not a problem. When you've got somebody who's kind of sold his last dime, to ultimately get, into a position of everything he's got, the sofa's gone, the house is is mortgaged, and ultimately buying Bitcoin because he thinks it's going upwards from 69K. I read a tweet yesterday, and the moral of the story was 55% plus of buyers have never sold Bitcoin, which kind of paints the story. It's probably liquidated they've been rather than sold, because they've all been buying at this. Now the other thing was, it was something like 80% of current Bitcoin holders have come in during 21. So if you think of where we were even at the start, if we give them the benefit of the doubt and we go the first of the year, these guys have only bought in up and around this level. So nobody's 10x their money, if you've been buying at, 2021 prices. And therefore, playing around in a larger value area, value range, it just makes a lot of sense. So, it's kind of painful to read a lot of these tweets with, 135K we're off to in December. We were going to hit 90 something in November. And there was just no logic back in that move up, right? So for me, all I'm trying to do is to advise and to show why we've got logic in this. This was ugly up, this was ugly. Then all of a sudden we actually had a very, almost pitch perfect 168. We had another 1618 down there, or I think that was actually a 50 bounce in terms of the retracement. And then ultimately up we come. So again, nothing really surprising, nothing really shocking on this particular move. And that's kind of what's scary to see, is that this was called all the way back. This roadmap was written out all the way back in March as a whole. And we've done nothing to deviate from that roadmap, as you can see. Nothing to deviate from that roadmap all the way through. And yet people find this kind of incredible that, we're still moving down at the moment. And I think you've just got to understand where we are in the cycle, where we are in the overall move, and understanding that will just give you a bit of confidence when you are ready to buy. My strategy is buy and hold. I'll be buying and holding when I get, to the right point. And I think overall, when we get there, I think it'll be obvious that we're actually there. So at the moment, nothing this side of Christmas I can see, unless we get a crazy wild candle. I don't know where Plan B has disappeared to with his 10K a day candles. But obviously that doesn't seem to be the effect that we get in right now. I think as we get closer to Christmas, a lot of the big institutional guys are going to be taking now the time off. So, I think it's going to be pretty slow. I think retail will absorb a lot of this with their plan to the moon. But I genuinely feel, where we are right now is an A. We might come back up for a B. That B would probably test somewhere around this level of liquidity, and then down for a C. And like I said, I'm not going to look at this in terms of bottom calling. We might come down and fill in this wick. We might only come and range in this a little bit more before ultimately moving up. I think we will get a stronger January. But, again, coming into then the much bigger picture, just to finish off with in terms of this video, if you think of where we are on that time frame, and this has only completed the monthly 3, right? We would probably expect the monthly 3. I'm going to take this out. We'd have a monthly 3 that looks something like this. We'd come down, and like I said, bare minimum, unless we go into some kind of, ridiculous combo move, which, still a possibility. I don't see it, but it's still a possibility. If we assume an A, we come back B, and we come down C, right? Let's just assume that we basically create some kind of bottom where we are right now, right? So this would be a double bottom in essence. We get that ABC move. Now, the next thing we'd be looking for is after the B and then down for the C, giving us the double bottom, we would then expect a 5 move up. And that 5 move will probably be where the initial forecast on the roadmap was. We might get somewhere between, looking at the levels, depending on how deep as well, obviously, but looking at the levels, we'd probably go I think 86 was one of the key areas there. 93, I think 108 was the next one. And I think at a real big extension, we were looking at about 125. So I think, overall, there is potential for taking this from a, 40K roughly, potentially as a value area. 40K up to 120, it's a good return. It's a good risk reward in terms of then that for a stop loss. But I think for me, that's where we are. So I think early into the new year, we might get a little bit of that accumulation. As the guy in the video I mentioned just now was saying, we could probably get a relatively strong January. These guys will have, new P&Ls, new books to actually kind of take out. And therefore, you could expect some kind of buy-in. And I just feel it really does depend on what this is going to look like. If we get a B over Christmas period and coming into the start of the new year, then I think it'll be the buy-in will actually take effect, which will why we'll end up seeing some kind of an accumulation phase before taking that up there, which fits the Elliott wave move, nicely. I think the traditional type stocks, being sold off in December and kind of bought back in January, again makes sense. These guys are actually wanting to buy Lambos for Christmas. It's not really a pipe dream for these. And I think, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, we are making lots of logical sense now to this particular move. And I think where we're going is monthly 5. I'll forecast that, especially for the subscribers into Discord. And then once we forecasted it, we'll get there. I think we'll have another sell off and we could potentially be back around this level, with an ABC, because we'll be actually at the monthly 5. So, if you think this is a bear market, potentially we'll see a bigger one after we tag that, 100K. And the other thing is, you stick a composite man hat on and you start to think, what's the maximum paying for retail? Can you imagine the level of buyers we'll be seeing at 100K? If we take 120K and drop, I think it'll be a lot of sad people again. So, I think this needs to be carefully considered, bought in at spot, and just buy in at the right times. And I think that's really where I feel the best opportunities are going to be, especially in Bitcoin standalone. Obviously, a lot of the altcoins will follow this as a whole, but I think for me, this is just kind of covering where we are, why we are where we are, where I think we go next, and then ultimately taking this into the new year. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.